is called berberine. It's the extract of the barberry root. It's something that's closely related to turmeric. It's actually a very pretty bright yellow color, just as turmeric is a very pretty almost yellow-orange color. But this ingredient is something that, and in fact, berberine is something that it's, when you look at the original clinical studies, it was one of those things that caught me off guard in terms of its efficacy. I had heard talk about it before, that it could support healthy blood sugar metabolism, healthy insulin metabolism, also support healthy lipid metabolism in terms of things like cholesterol and the like. But when I saw the original published clinical studies, I was actually surprised by its efficacy. It's a product that you take one capsule with each meal. It's something always to be taken with food. Cinnamon is something you just take 1 or 2 capsules daily, but the two together are a perfect 1-2 punch in terms of supporting healthy blood sugar metabolism and also helping support healthy lipid metabolism in the case of berberine. So they're products that deliver an opportunity in an area that, as I said, for probably the first 25 years that I was in this industry, I really didn't have a specific product that I could offer to support our blood sugar levels, to support us in those areas. Now I have 2 products, our cinnamon and our berberine, and berberine also has the additional benefits of supporting healthy blood lipid levels as well. So these are in terms of cholesterol, total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol. So these are 2 natural tools. They're not drugs. They're not medicines. They're not designed to treat or prevent any kind of disease. They're just designed to support sort of a healthy balance in our body when it comes to blood sugar level, insulin metabolism, when it comes to our lipid metabolism and the levels of those critical lipids we monitor, such as our total cholesterol and our LDL cholesterol levels. I think just as the reviews speak to both of these products, I think you'll be thrilled if you try them. Berberine is a product that we only recently mentioned on air for the first time. It's a product that we only recently introduced probably a year ago because much like cinnamon, I take my time. The minute a product is an interesting product, I don't immediately bring it to market. I first have to evaluate all the science behind the product, the clinical science, the science in terms of its mechanism of action, how it goes about doing what it does. And then we also validate the ingredients and make sure that the ingredients are going to deliver the same benefits that were exciting to